I think January of this year, and just to get it, just Google Homeowner's Handbook to prepare for natural hazards. It's the 4th edition. It has 2 new hazards: volcanoes and climate change. So Wes, we were talking about heat and wildfire and things like that, and it has sections on those in there. And but the key thing I think most of the people in Manoa would be interested in is has a lot of new retrofit options.
Yeah.
And these are just the partners in the book. I'm just going to scroll real quick. I'm going to actually record this thing and put it on our website. So if you want to see some of the information, you could see the recording and go back to it. Okay. Here are some of the private partners in the book. The ones with the star indicate they've been with the book since 2007. Okay, so
Dennis, real quick, what does a partner mean in respect to the handbook? That they've contributed material?
They've contributed either technical information, or they help pay for like print runs, or they help with outreach.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So we have like 35 partners in the book right now.
Okay.
Let me just click this. So, and you've probably seen this. This is our, we're trying to prepare people for our worst case scenario, which is a hurricane like Iniki hitting Oahu. If something like Iniki did hit Oahu, they think instead of 6,000 or 7,000 houses damaged or destroyed on Kauai, Oahu has 8 times more structures. So that gives you roughly around 50,000 times 50,000 houses damaged or destroyed. Okay, so that was in '92, and then in 2018, Lane almost threatened us to do the same thing, and you can see Lane coming up here. Very fortunate that it just dissipated. It weakened and turned to the west all of a sudden. One of the things I want people to know about is this cone of uncertainty. There's a 66% probability when NOAA does these cones, there's a 66% probability that the eye is going to be in the cone. That means there's a 33% probability that the eye is going to be outside of the cone. So when this graph was made, people might say, oh, Oahu looks safe because it's outside of the cone, but there's still there's a lot of uncertainty involved. And also, some new features added to these graphics are there's a diameter of the dark brown is the diameter of the hurricane force winds, and the orange is the diameter of the tropical storm force winds. So you could, even if Lane did follow this course, the diameter of the tropical storm force winds was great enough that it would still have impacted Oahu.
Oh.
Yes. Okay. So when you talk about a hurricane, you got to think about the triple threat. And I don't think Manoa, in Manoa, you don't have to worry about storm surge that much. But what's going to happen in a hurricane, there's going to be wind, storm surge, and flooding. And this diagram shows what happened with Iniki. It was unusual because it was moving forward so fast. The winds were going 120 miles per hour, rotational speed counterclockwise, and in the right front quadrant, the forward movement and the rotational speed add together, and you get 150 mile per hour sustained winds. In the left front quadrant, they subtract, you get 90 mile per hour sustained winds. So there's a huge difference in forces. It's almost like there's a category 4 hurricane in the right front quadrant and a category 1 hurricane in the left front quadrant. And the reason it was such a great difference is because the forward movement of Iniki was so great. It was 30 miles per hour. So in most cases, it won't be that great. Like sometimes hurricanes may be moving only at 5 or 6 miles per hour or 15 miles per hour. But because the forward movement is so great, Iniki had a great disparity between the right and left front quadrant. Another thing to note, that's regard to the winds. And then the storm surge is primarily on the right front quadrant. It's where the wind is blowing the water onto the coastline. So here's where the storm surge occurred for Kauai. And then the third threat is the flooding. So there's going to be a lot of rainfall, and you're going to see, especially along stream systems like Anapepe or Waimea stream, or even Manoa stream. Okay, so those are the triple threats from the hurricane you got to plan for. Okay, so in the book we have tips on emergency planning and emergency supplies and evacuation planning. One of the things people confuse a lot is tsunami evacuation and hurricane evacuation. Only use the tsunami evacuation maps for tsunami. You know, for instance where there's a tsunami, you get these maps. You get these several places. It's on the City and County Department of Emergency Management website. You get it on your phone book. Look at the most recent phone book. You'd also get it at the Hawaii Emergency Management website. They'll have it for the state, okay? But only use these maps for tsunamis, okay? For hurricanes, remember the triple threat. So storm surge or waves, flooding, and wind, and we're going to talk about these. Storm surge maps, okay? Here's where you look up your storm surge maps, and again, this is not going to, you probably won't have to deal with this from Manoa, but I use an example of the south shore of Oahu, and here's Wailupi Peninsula, and you just go to the link, here's the link here, pick the Hawaii tab, pick the category of hurricane, and you'll see gives you the depth of water. Now, this is a worst case scenario. Remember, the storm surge is occurring on the left front quadrant of the hurricane. So if something like Lane or Iniki was coming from the south, you may get something like this if it's on the left front if you're on the right front quadrant. But say you're on the south shore of Oahu and you have a hurricane approaching from the east, like Douglas, you won't get something like this. So it's important to look to know what your potential zones are. Always know your zones, but always wait for local emergency management for instructions before you act or before you evacuate. Okay, here are the flood maps. Here's the link for the flood maps here. And you can see here again is Wailupi Peninsula. Here's like coastal V zone that's associated with waves. And here's a stream flooding. That's an A zone here, okay? And here's the link, and there's some instructions how to look up your flood zone. You just type in your address or put in your tax map key. And so when you are planning for the water aspect of a hurricane, it's important to look for both, because here's a good example of why. Okay, the flood map indicates that Wailupi Peninsula is okay to stay there during a hurricane. The storm surge map indicates it's not okay. The storm surge map indicates it's okay to stay like along the stream here, but the flood map indicates it's not okay. So you got to look at both the storm surge map and the flood map to see if there's a threat of water. And again, you use this for planning purposes. You really want to wait for instructions from a local emergency management before you act, because this is, like I said, for a hurricane coming from the south, and it could be, say, a hurricane coming from the east, like Douglas, right? So, and right now the city or the state is analyzing some interactive or actual time storm surge mapping models. So they'll be able to give you an actual idea of areas that are threatened, maybe like a day or two before the event. So that's what you're going to act on. But it's important to know that you could be in a storm surge zone, and you would make your emergency plan accordingly. It's better to know about the threat beforehand than after, than when the event's right there.
Hey, Dennis,
Yes.
Dennis, I got a question regarding that.
Sure.
Okay, now, so if this hurricane was going and did a direct hit with Oahu, these are the concerns, or if it veered to the south of Oahu, which area is the most dangerous? Like storm surge, the winds, and so on.
Okay, all of them are a concern. It's a triple threat, and each one of those threats by itself could be a problem. So with this information, you'll get an idea of like the storm surge threat and the flooding threat. The flooding threat, especially inland, is going to be along low-lying areas and streams. The storm surge is going to be where you're going to be, where the right front quadrant of the hurricane is hitting. And I'm going to show you, I'm about to show you another graph which will explain this more, okay? But I'm going to explain through about the wind also. But you keep an eye on both the flood map and storm surge map. It's important to know your zone. In Manoa, you're probably not going to have any storm surge. Realize also when there's storm surge, it's going to be waves on top of that. So that's something to keep in mind. But for Manoa, you're going to have Manoa Stream there. So it's likely you're going to get some flooding along the stream. And the way to look at is to look at your flood maps and type in your address or tax map key. Does that help, Irvin?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does look like, when I look at the flood hazard map for Manoa Valley, right, using
Yes.
that link that you showed us.
Yes.
Yeah, it looks like the flood zone is primarily along the stream, Irvin.
Yeah. And realize too that just because you're outside of a high-risk flood zone doesn't mean you're safe, because there's localized topography. Okay, you could be like in Mililani or high up area, and you get localized topography causing flooding. And when Sandy or I think both Sandy hit New York and Harvey hit Houston, there was like huge, I think for Sandy, it was like almost like greater than 50% of the properties that were flooded were outside the high-risk flood zones. So the way to know if you got risk is to look at your flood maps, but also understand your property. And if your property has historically flooded in the past, then that's a risk you should consider.
Do you have diagrams of if the approach came from the north?
Okay.
What types of?
Okay. Well, we're going to cover that right now. Okay. Because here now we're going to cover the wind. Okay. And again, the wind's going counterclockwise. This is like the wind diagram for, I think, Katrina on the Gulf Coast, but it shows in the northern hemisphere, the wind is always going counterclockwise around the eye of the hurricane. And here's Lane, okay? So Lane and Douglas should be wake-up calls for everyone.
Yeah.
If Lane hit Oahu, we would still be recovering today from that event, okay? Now, and it's showing two things. One, okay, and then Douglas almost hit Oahu, right? So within 2 years, we've had two events hit us, almost hit us, and we've had a lot of near misses. Like in 2015, we had almost a record 16 number of tropical cyclones. In 2016, we had Lester and Madeline. In and so in 2018, Lane. And so in the next 30 years, I mean, we can't expect us to be so fortunate all the time. And especially with the waters are getting warmer, and there's an indication by NOAA, National Weather Service, that especially these hurricanes coming from the east, like Douglas, are starting to track further to the north. Usually they would go to the south of the Big Island, right? But now they seem to be coming further to the north. So we really got to be on our be aware and be proactive. So I'm going to tell you that we're going to talk about the wind, because if a system's coming from the south, like Lane, the wind's going to go counterclockwise like this. And on Oahu, the first winds you see are going to be from the east. And then if the eye goes over you, it's going to be calm. And then the winds are going to come from the west. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if it's Douglas, say the system's coming from the east, like Douglas, remember the winds are going counterclockwise. The first winds that are going to hit you are from the north. Remember all the forecasts? They said the winds are coming from the north. And then as the system bypasses us, they're going to come from the south. Okay? So the point is, people always ask, do I protect? A lot of people think, oh, the hurricane's coming from the south. I'm only going to protect my south-facing windows. You got to protect the entire envelope of your house, especially for the long term. Okay? I'm not sure if that's what your question is based on.
No, that's good. That's a good explanation, because I mean, I was in the Air Guard, and then during the Iniki we got activated, so I did see the damage that was done when, exactly like you said, the winds came from the east, and then the winds came from the west, because you could see the damage and how it was shaped.
Yeah. So it's gonna you're gonna get slightly different effects, like the storm surge. Like say if Lane hit, the storm was going like this, then storm surge would be at the left front quadrant. Say Douglas hit like this, you would probably be okay, because the left front quadrant of the hurricane is north of Oahu, so you probably wouldn't have storm surge. But again, you would have like different wind effects, different rain effects, and so forth. So it's important to know the systems, and you got to know now that we could expect something from the south, we could expect something from the east. Yeah. Okay.
Dennis, can you speak just a little bit about the conditions, right? That in Lane's situation, for example, right? What caused that veer to the left, as it approached the islands? Was that ever really kind of explained, in terms of the forecast?
It was, and it's very unusual. I mean, it was unusual that it made such a right turn like this, because remember Aniki just went north and went straight north, right?
Right.
If Lane went straight north, it would have hit Oahu. So what happened was there was wind shear. The wind shear picked up, and it caused the system to weaken and decouple from the base to the top, and then the trade winds were able to blow the system to the west.
Got it.
Okay, so I want to show you some of the diagrams that I use when I prepare myself. I go to the National Weather Service, National Hurricane Center, and they produce forecasts every 6 hours. If the system's getting closer, they go maybe even every 3 hours. But every 6 hours, they'll do this. They'll produce a cone of uncertainty. And I already told you how to read these things. Just because you're outside of the cone doesn't mean you're safe. Like Big Island, right? It looks like they're outside of the cone, but the system could still veer to the south. And also you could see the diameter of the tropical storm force winds. Another diagram I use is earliest reasonable arrival time for tropical storm force winds. I use this because, and it really depends, because we encourage people to protect their windows, and depends on what window protection system they have. Some systems are always in place and therefore time's not as critical, but some who are using, say, plywood, they need more time and they don't want to be carrying this stuff around when there's tropical storm force winds. So I always plan, if I'm going to use plywood, I always plan that the earliest arrival time is like a day before. You know, I start preparing like a day before the earliest expected arrival time. Okay. And then also I use this thing, tropical storm force wind probability. You could see at this point in time, Douglas, there was a 90% probability we would get tropical storm force winds. So
Right.
I actually did, for the first time in 5 years, I actually did a full deployment on my house. So normally, I'll explain what it is. Normally, I've done some partial deployments, like for Leicester or Madeline or Lane. But for Douglas, it was the first time I did a full deployment. That was after I saw July 26th. You know, there was a 90% probability that we'd get tropical storm force winds, but it actually, and they actually sounded the sirens, remember? But it actually veered away and we didn't really get anything, which is good, but it's also bad because people always are always going to think that it's always going to veer away. And then one day it's not, and they're going to get caught by surprise.
Oh, okay, so Dennis, now let's look at Lane's path, right? Compared to, I'm sorry, Douglas's path compared to Lane, right?
Yeah.
So remember you were saying that in Lane's case, right, the wind shear and the trade winds blew it away from us.
Yeah.
Why was it that in Douglas's case, the same thing didn't occur and it actually blew it towards us as opposed to going away from us, right? Which is what ended up happening, right?
Yeah.
Douglas ended up tracking further north from us, right?
Yeah. Oh,
So it's almost contrary to what happened with Lane.
Yeah. I can't tell you the exact reason. I know that for Douglas, there was low wind shear. And
Okay.
generally the systems that are moving, well, and also there are a lot of complex interactions because like
Right.
there's like where they're high pressure systems and low pressure systems, and hurricanes hate high pressure. They you know, and they always go towards low pressure. So that when Aniki curved north, all of a sudden, there was a low pressure system, and that's why it curved north so quickly and moved quickly to the north. So there's Douglas did stay on the course. Fortunately, it veered a little to the north, but it was like within the you know, to create these cones, there's like hundreds of models that they use, and it was like all within the expected forecast.
Right.
That you know, it did not, and that's what's saving grace. So the eye of the hurricane is you can see the tropical storm force winds are greater, and then the eye is where it's really intense. And because we're such a small target, you know, it's got to be like almost a perfect hit for us to be affected.
Right.
But that's why I tell people, a lot of times they say, oh, I have a single wall house, you know, it's never going to survive a category 3 or something. I tell them strengthen it anyway, because you know, even if it's a strong system, you're more likely to get hit by the tropical storm force winds than the eye of the hurricane, and it'll make a difference when you're you know, how your house performs.
Got it. Okay,
so now we're going to go to another thing. Topography is going to affect your wind speed. So this is a map done by Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. It's in the Guide to Hurricane Strengthening, and it shows like the 105 miles per hour is your design wind speed for Oahu, and you could see that at 105 miles per hour, there's going to be wind speed up when there's an elevation increase. So actually, areas like Manoa, there's going to be a wind speed increase. It's here's 105. I think it goes up to 120 in Manoa. So there's going to be some natural increase in wind speed, just where you're located.
Is that because it's coming from say the south side up
Yes.
the valley, or is it running from the
This is
whole house down?
this is from like the south side. It's the hurricane comes from the south,
Yeah.
and you're in the right front quadrant. And if it's 105 miles per hour, you could expect some increase in wind speed. Yeah, or any wind, you'll expect some increase. It's just like the higher up you go, it's like when you're on the Poly, right? The Poly lookout, and the wind's coming up the lookout. There's a wind speed up. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Okay. Then also the last thing we want people, you don't want to shelter in place if you're in a flood zone or in a storm surge zone, but also your house should be strong enough for the wind. So we put this graphic. This is, oh, okay. There's someone else is entering. Okay. Okay. So anyway, this is in the 4th edition of the book. So I remember the story about the 3 little pigs, straw, wood, and stone, and the big bad wolf. Okay, so same thing with houses, single wall house, double wall house, and a stone house. The stone house is inherently stronger than a double wall, which is inherently stronger than a single wall. So your ability to shelter in place for a hurricane depends on how strong your house is, and also how strong the hurricane is. So here's unsafe, marginal, good, better, and best. So even for a single wall house, though, it's possible to strengthen it. So what we encourage everyone to do, whether they're single wall, double wall, or stone, we want to make sure their house is good condition. No termite damage, no wood rot, no corrosion of fasteners. And then we want to make sure that every house has hurricane clips, whether if your house doesn't have hurricane clips, and I'll explain when they were put in, you could easily add them. It's not that hard. We're going to explain that later, okay? And then some of the a little more difficult retrofits are like window protection and foundation upgrades. But the point is, every house could be strengthened. For a single wall house, we could only strengthen it so much. And a double wall house, we think we could strengthen it, all the way to as strong as a house built in the current building codes. So really, we encourage every house to be strengthened. It doesn't need to be done all at one time. You could do it over a period of years. But the first thing we would recommend is you put it in good condition and you add hurricane clips. Okay, here's the reason why to retrofit. And this is Hurricane Harvey making landfall as a Category 4 in Rockport, Texas. Remember, Aniki hit Kauai as a Category 4, but it was only a Category 4 in the right front quadrant because of the rotational speed and the forward movement added together. Okay, but nevertheless, Hawaii has experienced Category 4 winds. Okay, so here's Rockport after Hurricane Harvey hit, and you could see 4 houses. You can see 4 is major damage, 4 is totally destroyed, 3 is major damage, 2 is moderate damage, and 1 is no damage at all. So we're going to look at out in the field and why these houses performed like they did. Okay, so here's the 4, the destroyed house, and here's major damage where the roof decking is coming off the trusses, the wall is coming off the siding is coming off the wall. Here's moderate damage where there's primarily damage being initiated at the corners and edges of the house, And we're going to explain that shortly. And then here's no damage. Okay, so why is this house no damage? Okay, so it was built in 2017, 3 months before Harvey hit, under modern building codes. So it has a continuous load path connection. We're going to explain what that is. It has a strong roof and window protection. So all of these things can be added to existing houses. We're going to cover that very shortly. And it's not that hard. Okay. So here's what a continuous load path connection is. It's essentially tying the roof to the wall and the wall to the foundation. Okay. Every intersection has a connection. Here's the roof to the wall. The weakest part is the is right here. So that's why the hurricane clip. That's this part A. And then the stud is tied to the double top plate with this strap. The second level is tied to the first level with this other strap. The stud is tied to the base plate with this other strap. And then the base plate, the sill plate, they call that the base plate, is anchored to the foundation with this anchor bolt. Okay? So that's a continuous load path connection. So houses built after 95 on Oahu have that continuous load path connection. Okay? But if you don't have it, you could try and add it as a retrofit. And as a retrofit, a lot of the connectors are done externally. So like this example here, okay, here's the hurricane clip, tying the beam to the column and the column to the foundation. Okay, that's a continuous load path. Okay, so on Oahu, okay, you guys raise your hand. How many homeowners here have their houses built before 88? Irvin, Wes, okay. But anyway, if you're built before 88, you don't have hurricane clips, no load path, and no window coverings probably. Then after 88, they required hurricane clips. It was in the building code after Hurricane Eva in 82. After 95, they required the load path, the continuous load path connection. That was a change in the building code after Aniki in 92. And then now the counties have a new building code which requires a load path, including hurricane clips, and it requires window protection or a safe room. Okay, but the point is, even houses that are over here, you could add almost all of these items as a retrofit. We're going to go over that right now. Okay, so here's one of the reasons why you want to tie the roof to the wall, the hurricane clip. Okay, this is the HPT clip made by Simpson Strong Tie, and it ties the roof rafter to the wall. It was designed a lot in the past. This freeze board used to stick out, so you couldn't use the traditional H3 clip, but with this HPT clip, it wraps around the freeze board, allows you to tie the roof rafter to the wall. So in the Homeowner's Handbook, there's a step-by-step guide on how to put in the HPT clip. It's not that hard. And if that's for people that are handy, you could probably do it in 2 Saturdays. If you're not handy, hire a contractor. It's under $2,000. For most small houses, it'll be around $1,500. And if you get some insurance discounts, you could have a payback of like 7 years or 8 years because they'll give you a discount for putting the clips in. It's a good investment. It strengthens your house. It adds value to your house. And the payback is in 7 or 8 years. So it's really a no-brainer. Not that hard to do. Again, if you don't want to do, if for people that are not handy, they could, for people that are handy, they could do it themselves. You know, it may take 2 or 3 Saturdays, $300 of material costs, or under $2,000. That just should be under $2,000 if you're going to hire someone. And this is what you're trying to prevent. Okay. So almost every house in the state could be retrofitted relatively easy with these hurricane clips. You could either use the H3 if there's no freeze board sticking out, or the HPT. Some people use the HM9, which is stronger. And we think that since 2007, around 3,000 houses have been retrofitted. So we encourage everyone in Manoa, you have a lot of older houses, retrofit those. And now the best time to do it is now. You cannot do it when Douglas is coming in during a watcher warning. It's too late. Unfortunately, whenever there's a watcher warning, all the new stations contact us, and it's too late. No, you can't do it. I know for a fact, after Douglas, there's been a run on contractors. One contractor had 30 people in line to do some type of window protection, and they're sort of like bogged down. You got to do it like when it's good, calm weather, like now, or even after. When hurricane season's over, is just as good a time to do it. You got to plan for the long term. You can't wait.
Dennis, what's a good place to buy these hurricane clips?
You could get them in numerous places: Home Depot, City Mill, Lowe's, Hardware Hawaii.
Okay, so they sell them everywhere, basically, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you're handy, put them in. If you're not handy, hire a contractor. It'll pay for itself off in 7 or 8 years, and it'll improve your house. It'll strengthen your house. It's
and then, like you said, you can get a discount too if you can show evidence that you've installed it. Is that what you're saying? That you get a discount on your hurricane insurance?
Yes, it depends on your insurance carrier, though. Some companies will give you an insurance discount. Some companies won't. But you could actually try, and even those companies that don't traditionally do it, like the one company I have insurance with now, doesn't traditionally do discounts for retrofits, but I just submitted a whole bunch of information to them on the retrofits we did, and we're trying to seek an adjustment in our premium.
Hey, Wes,
Yes, Irvin.
I just installed clips about 3 months ago with EPS. It's Jerry Peters.
Yeah.
And it comes out, like you said, about $1,800. But my hurricane insurance, I have it with Palomar.
Yeah.
It went from $2,300, and with the discount, it's down to $1,600.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Wow.
So in 3 years, you'll pay it off then, right? With the discount.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, it's a no-brainer, Wes. Encourage everyone in Manoa to put them in. Okay,
Yep.
I'm counting on you guys, Irvin, Wes,
Yeah.
Ella, Helen out there. Encourage everyone to put them in. Does anyone have a Post and Peer Foundation?
Yeah, I have a Post and Peer.
Okay. So this is pretty common all throughout Hawaii. And what it is essentially you have a large concrete block like this, and then there's a smaller concrete block called the tofu block. There's a termite pan there. And there's a post sitting on the termite block pan, and it's all sitting there by friction. There's no connection. So during a hurricane or earthquake, there's a risk that they'll get knocked off their block. Okay, so here's a retrofit. It was done a report by Ian Robertson and Gary Chalk, 2 structural engineers. They were working on their FEMA hazard mitigation grant program. They put this design together where you retrofit this post and pier. You essentially put 2x4 scabbing between the edge of the tofu block and the post, and then you attach it with hold downs into the post, and then an anchor bolts into the concrete pier. Okay, so in the book, there's a step-by-step guide on how to do this. I'm not going to go over it in detail because it's going to take a little time, not a lot of time, but there's a step-by-step guide. If you're handy, you could actually do this yourself also. I would recommend you seek the advice of a license for all these retrofits. seek the advice of a licensed architect, licensed structural engineer first before you proceed. But if you're handy, you could still maybe be able to do this yourself. And there's a step-by-step guide on how to do this retrofit. Here's like adding knee brace stabilizers to the kickers, and attaching the hold downs, and then drilling the holes for the anchor bolts, and tying the hold downs to the scabbing and also the concrete post. Okay. Wes, for you, I mean, this is like a more detailed. Most people, I would say, most people are, if they're handy, they could do the hurricane clips. This is like a little more. It's not that hard to do, but it's a little more. You have to be a little handier, I guess.
Right.
But there are contractors who have been doing this. We know, like, since this retrofit came into the book, there's like 2 or 3 houses that we have examples that they did this retrofit on Oahu. And so I could, if it is possible to do. And here's what it looks like as a final thing. You can see how strong it looks, right? And
Right.
also, so now what you have here is a house that was built in 1956. Remember, they didn't require a load path until 1995, but now you have hurricane clips throughout the whole, all the trusses there, and then you have all these hold downs here. So it's a 1956 house with a continuous load path, and the insurance for this example went from $1,200 to $900 a year. Okay, so consider that. Does anyone have a double wall house? Double wall house. Okay. So, Wes, it sounds like you have a mixed double wall, single wall house. Is that right?
No, it's double wall, but it's post and pier.
Wow. Okay.
Actually, it's unusual because I'm on a downslope. So the front part of the house is actually on a concrete pad.
Okay.
And then the downslope part is on the post and pier.
Okay. Well, anyway, for double wall houses, it's still possible to strengthen those even more. Okay. So one of the things that's new is like these structural screws, and you can see this one serves the same purpose as this hurricane clip there. And then this one, tying the stud to the double top plate, serves the same function as a strap, tying that stud to the double top plate there. And then this one tying the stud to the sill plate, serves the same function as this strap there. And the last part of the load path is an anchor bolt of the sill plate to the foundation. Well, I'm going to cover that shortly. But you can see, here's a house, a current house under current building codes. Here's a structural engineer here, and they're using structural screws instead of the traditional fasteners to do the load path for this house. Okay, here are the structural screws. This occurring, during construction. But as a retrofit, it's also possible to do the retrofit. And again, before you try doing this, consult with a licensed structural engineer and architect. But it's possible to drill these structural screws through the siding, this hardy siding here, and tying the key elements together. The key is knowing where the bottom of the double top plate is. And once you know where that is, you already know where all the trusses and rafters are. And so you could, and you'll know where the studs are, because studs are typically where the nails are in the hardy siding. Okay, you can see this hurricane clip in this house. This house was built in 1992 as an H2.5 clip tying this truss to the double top plate. And then we drilled this, we purposely missed this connection, but it just shows that you could tie the same elements together by swinging this structural screw over and tying the double top plate to this rafter. Okay, so in this house, you could say, oh, we don't want to drill holes in the house. Here's like where all the structural screws went in this house. And go, okay, we don't want to drill holes in this house. We don't want to drill holes in this house. It looks ugly. But once you put in the structural screws, you could patch it with a silicone sealant and a cement filler, and then you sand and paint it, and it looks like new. So this house, 1992 double wall house, it has 156 structural screws, all at all 3 different levels.
I'm on our Zoom conference.
Tying
right
different.
now.
Oh,
I'm sorry about that.
I'm gonna mute Ella right now. Okay, he was on the phone, but I'll unmute him when he's off the phone. Okay, so okay, I better mute. There we go. Okay, so it has 156 structural screws at all different levels, and therefore the dead weight of the house prevents sliding of the house, uplift. These are all impacts from wind, overturning or racking of the house. Just makes it a lot stronger. The dead weight of the house resists those wind forces. And the only thing that's potentially missing is tying that stud to the foundation. But you could see even you could do that as a retrofit also. And this is a little more detailed, but the point is, if you're really gung-ho, you can make a double wall house even stronger than a house built in the current building codes. Here's a house built in 2020, and it's using this hold down, which has 3,700 pounds of uplift protection. And here's that 1993 house. We took the siding off, and then we added anchor bolts and a hold down, which has this hold down is stronger than this hold down. It has 5,600 pounds of uplift protection. Okay, so and that's as a retrofit. And then after you put back the siding and paint it, it'll look like new. And it's, again, this house is now has elements that are stronger than a house built in their current building code. So if you're really into it, you can make your house a lot stronger, especially, again, for a single wall house, we could only do so much. For a double wall house or stone house, you could really make it strong. Okay, window protection. Here's a Niki, and you can see Kauai during the Niki, and you can see this wood pallet flying around. Very strong winds. You got to protect your windows. This is why you want to keep the envelope of the house intact. Here, the wind pressure is only on the outside, okay? But here, there's a breach in the envelope. That could be a broken window, for instance. And what's going to happen is you get internal pressurization. It'll blow up your house, and then the uplift pressure on the roof to wall connection, the hurricane clips you put on there to hold that roof on, they'll be working twice as hard, and it's more likely the roof will blow up. So a lot of times we've seen in hurricane areas when a house is fine, but once the envelope gets breached, and then sometimes the roof will blow off. That's a common progressive failure sequence. Okay.
So you really shouldn't open your window, right, at all.
No.
During a hurricane, right?
Nothing gets in your nothing. It's like, do you want would you want to let a robber in your house?
Right.
Okay. You want the impacts are going to look the same. If you have a robber in your house or you let hurricane winds in your house, it's going to look the same. You want nothing gets in your house. So we're going to talk about protecting that envelope. And one way to do it is with plywood. Okay, and I mentioned that here's plywood protecting your windows. Okay, it's good because it's cheap, readily available, but it's heavy. For most people, it's heavy. But I mentioned that I did a partial deployment with plywood for Anna in 2014, Lester and Madeline in 2016, Lane in 2018. And for Douglas, you know, remember we were looking at those, we did what's called a full deployment, where a partial deployment was you only hang up the panels, put in a quarter of the fasteners. If the system veers away, it's easy to take down. If the system looks like it's coming in, then you put in the rest of the fasteners. But the idea is you don't want to be carrying this stuff when there's tropical storm force winds around, okay? The idea is all the fasteners go in the structural framing of the window. Windows are typically framed by two 2x4s. So it goes into the 2x4s, and we use what's called storm panel screws, where what I do for a partial deployment typically, and the book covers a partial deployment and a full deployment. For storm panel screws, I just put on the top left, top right corner, and it's usually covered by this plastic cap. When there's an incoming event, I pull the cap, the panel's prepared already. I hang the panel, fasten it with a wing nut. It takes 5 minutes for each window. It takes an hour to prepare the panel beforehand, but 5 minutes to hang it up once it's prepared. And that's why it's important to do it, you know, not when there's an incoming event. Not only that, if there's an incoming event, they'll probably have already run out of storm panel screws already. So you got to really be proactive. You know,
Dennis,
yes.
what size thickness plywood would you recommend?
The choices are 3/4 inch, which is really heavy, and I wouldn't recommend it. 5/8 inch is recommended. The 5/8 inch will still pass the large missile test. That for windows, you know, for window protection to pass, like in Miami-Dade County, which has the strictest building codes for window protection, it has to pass a large missile test. That's a 9-pound 2x4 going at 34 miles per hour. 5/8 inch plywood will pass that missile test. Half inch plywood will not pass the missile test, but it's better than nothing. And under current building codes, under the International Building Code and International Residential Code, they still allow 1/2 inch plywood. But if you can handle the weight, use 5/8 inch plywood. But if you can't handle the weight, I would get some other system. We're going to cover that shortly. Okay. Here's what the storm panel screws look like. Okay. There's like under normal conditions, like it's always in place, and it's either around the full perimeter for a full perimeter install or just on the top left or right corner. Okay. And it's covered with this white cap. And then when there's an incoming event, you pull the cap off and then you hang the panel and you fasten it with the wing nuts. Okay. If you don't use the storm panel screws, you could use other like a duplex nail to hang the plywood and other screws. But the key thing, again, it's always best to prepare beforehand. You know, don't wait till there's a watch or warning. Your panels should be prepared before hurricane season, ideally. Okay, so we're going to go over other window protection systems. Okay, so here's what the National Weather Service has. Roll down shutters. They're more expensive, but the advantage is you just throw a switch and they deploy automatically. Fabric. Okay, so this is for large or unusually shaped windows. It's a hurricane fabric. It'll pass the missile test. Okay, your window may break, but it'll still hold the envelope. Here's a house protected with fabric. The windows, and the fabric is good. It's lightweight. It's easier to deploy. You usually just, you know, store the fabric in a bag. It could be in your garage or whatever. Okay, and this is the Board of Water Supply. I took this picture. They were using fabric to protect their windows during Hurricane Douglas. This is what they were using to protect their windows. Okay, so good for large or unusually shaped windows. Good for double wall houses also possible for single wall houses. Accordion shutters. This is a house in Kaimuki, and it's always deployed. And to deploy it, you just swing each shutter, and it joins in the middle, and then you lock it. Another option which is becoming popular is these polycarbonate panels. They pass the missile test also, and they're lightweight and strong, but in the past they were not readily available, but now they're becoming more readily available. Contractors are bringing them in. And here's a polycarbonate panel protecting a window on a single wall house. It has storm panel screws are on the perimeter, and that's how they're protecting their window. Impact resistant windows. This is a little more expensive. I always tell people it's almost like buying a car. But you think of it, you buy a car and you drive it off the lot, and it's 70% of its value after you drive it off the lot, and it only lasts 10 years. The impact resistant windows are always in place. They add value to your house. They'll protect your house for 50 years. And you could, you have other environmental characteristics. They could dampen sound, block UV radiation, make your house cooler, and it opens up view planes, because what happens is the fact that it's reflecting all the light and heat. You could see the reflection on this window. Well, when you're inside the house, people can't see you, but you could see outside. So it allows you to open up all the blinds in the house, and it really adds a different touch to the house. So it's really a good investment. It's expensive, but it's a good investment. Okay, so here's the different options to protect your windows. Cheapest is plywood. Most expensive is impact-resistant windows. The trade-off is time to deploy. And one thing to consider, don't think like you need to just do all of one for your entire house. It's perfectly okay to mix and match. You know, if you have like second floor windows, maybe you do roll downs or impact resistant windows on the second floor, and for your easily accessible windows on the first floor, use plywood or honeycomb panels or a fabric, okay? A hurricane screen. You don't need to do all, it doesn't need to be all of one or all of the other. You can mix and match for your situation. Okay, roofing. Okay, whenever there's tropical storm force winds or a hurricane, there's going to be more pressure on your roof, on the edges, and corners of your roof. So here's an example. This is a house in Kapoho after tropical storm Isel. It's not even a hurricane, and you can see the wind damage be initiated at the corner of the other house, and along the edges here, there's another house in Kapoho. You can see the shingles are starting to come off along the edges. So if you re-roof, and we're not saying people re-roof right away, but people re-roof a lot of times when the roof has reached the edge of their useful life, or when they add solar, they commonly re-roof. So if you re-roof, make sure your roof is attached to the trusses well. Okay, so here's Hurricane Harvey, a house in Rockport, and you'd see the roof deck has come off the roof. So you want to make sure if you re-roof, use ring shake nails to attach your roof deck to the trusses and rafters. Or you could use wood deck screws. And to add ring shake nails to your roof, a lot of times when they re-roof, they peel off all the shingles already, and it's not that much more expense to add ring shake nails, okay? Even if you don't re-roof, you could still make that roof to wall connect, not the truss to roof deck connection stronger. You could use a subfloor adhesive, that's from the inside, or a lot of times what people are doing now is they use the spray polyurethane foam, which is insulation. It makes your roof cooler, and that also strengthens that roof deck to truss connection. If you re-roof, it's not common in Hawaii to do this. They commonly do it in commercial properties, but they'll take off your shingles, and before they put it back, make your roof a sealed roof. It's where you're putting a self-adhering modified bitumen layer along the entire deck of the roof. It seals your roof. It's going to seal your roof, make it virtually leak-proof. There's no water that could get through the cracks or joints or holes in your roof. Okay. When they add shingles, okay, follow the tips in the guidebook. And in the guidebook, we use this FEMA guidance, and because the uplift pressure is greater on the corners and edges of the roof, along the edges and corners of the roof, add dabs of the asphalt cement to make that connection stronger. Okay, if you have a gable end roof, you could add bracing, such as cross bracing, and there are all different kinds of bracing that are in the homeowner's handbook. Doors, okay, garage doors are a potential weakness in a house. So here's a garage door that has vertical bracing. These braces were installed after the garage door was installed. They take 5 to 10 minutes to put up for each one. It comes as a kit. For your front door, you should always have a door with 3 latches and three hinges and a latch that has at least an inch throw. And one thing that's very protective you can consider is changing your screen door to a security screen door, because it has two areas where it secures the door to the hinge, and it's going to provide security and hurricane protection. And it also, when you fortify your house, it's going to be hard for things to get in and hard for you to get out. So you always want to make sure you have 2 exit points in your house, and the security screen is a good way to get it. Okay, so now all of these items, it may seem like a lot, and that's why I say try and do these things a little over several years, starting with the easiest things, like your hurricane clips, and then your windows. Maybe each year do something else, but over time strengthen your house. Okay.
Dennis, what is that thing in the garage again? The garage door thing that you were talking about? What?
Oh, there's a vertical brace. Okay, there are 2 vertical braces. Okay, so it attaches to the beam overhead here, and there's a hinge, and the brace goes all the way down, and then there's these arms that go into each one of the bolts in the garage door, and then there's 3 anchor screws that go into the concrete floor.
Does that retract with the door?
No, you gotta take this off to open and close the door. Once you install it, this is something that's to the side, hang to the side of your garage, and you only put it up. When there's an incoming event. It takes 5 to 10 minutes to put up, but once these are in, the garage door will not open and close.
Got it.
Okay. The other thing too, a lot of people, another way to protect your windows is laminate glass. People put a laminate film on their windows. We don't encourage the other thing. Don't use masking tape. Don't open your windows. But it is possible to use a laminate film, but it's not as strong as a panel system. But if you're going to use a laminate film, and a lot of them have some impact resistance, you should have a silicone structural sealant that attaches the laminate to the edge of the window frame. Okay. So trees. Okay. We just covered trees. Make sure that whenever this is going to be a problem in Manoa, but because you have so many trees, but to the extent you can, you want to make sure the tree is at least a distance away from the house greater than the height of a full-grown tree. If you can't do that, try and make sure limbs don't overhang the roof of your house. And also see if you can't remove the tree, try and see if you could thin it so it doesn't act like an umbrella. When there's strong wind, it could more likely to tip over. You want to do there's some tips for trees in the handbook, and there's also a lot of HECO guidance. So, because you want to keep trees away from the edge of your house, you want to keep trees away from your power line, but you do want trees because of the benefit. So it's good to perfectly plan what tree you use and where you put it. Okay. The last thing I'm going to cover is insurance, and there's only 2 slides for this. Okay. And there's hurricane insurance and there's flood insurance. So I think all houses in Hawaii should have hurricane insurance. Okay. If you have a mortgage, they're going to require you to have hurricane insurance. Okay. My house is pretty strong, and I've done a lot to fortify it, but there's still risk. Right across my house, across the property, there's a big tree, and there's nothing I could do about that tree. So it's important to have, hurricane insurance. You never know what's going to happen. Okay. So protect yourself. Flood insurance. If you're in a high-risk flood zone and you have a mortgage, they're going to require you to have flood insurance. If you have any risk of flooding, whether you're in a high-risk flood zone, you may be in a high-risk flood zone and you don't have a mortgage and you don't have flood insurance, you should try and get flood insurance. If you're not in a high-risk flood zone, but you have a history of flooding, get flood insurance, okay? Okay, so key things to cover for insurance. I'm just going to mention again, there's 3 types of insurance. There's your home insurance, there's hurricane insurance, and there's flood insurance. I forgot to mention what hurricane insurance covers water damage if it's coming from the top down. Flood insurance covers it when it's coming from the bottom up. Okay, that's the difference. And hurricane insurance will also cover the wind damage from a hurricane. But it won't cover wind damage. If you don't have hurricane insurance and there's a hurricane, your homeowner's insurance will not cover it. Your homeowner's insurance will cover wind damage from like a tropical storm or tropical depression, but not from a hurricane. Okay, so key to consider, there's 3 types of insurance: standard, hurricane, catastrophic insurance, and flood insurance. Know the difference between the 3. Make sure there's not a gap in your coverage. Remember, you're insuring for replacement cost, not market value. Your inflation costs may have gone up. You may have bought it may have been cost like $200,000 to build your house like 30 years ago, but now it's going to cost like $400,000. There's going to be inflation, and there's a part of it's going to be relating to building codes. There's going to be increased costs of compliance, and then factor in your improvements and consider that there's surge demand. Whenever there's an event, the contractors may be 30% more expensive. And then also remember, there's a waiting period. So if there's a hurricane coming like Douglas and it's like three weeks out, it's too late to get flood insurance. And if it crosses the 140-degree longitude, it's going to be too late to get hurricane insurance. You got to plan about these things. You can't get them when the event's coming in. Okay, so that's pretty much all I have for today. And
Oh, that's a lot of good information, Dennis. That was awesome.
okay, great. And again, it seems like a lot, but just do the simple things first. Put your hurricane clips in. Make sure your house is in good condition. That's a good start. And then, of course, you want to make sure you have your emergency plan, emergency supplies, and so forth. Over time, we did a lot of these things in our house, but it didn't occur all in 1 year. It occurred like over a period of 10 years. So just think about always making these improvements continuously. Think of it like, you always, like yourself, you always want to try and improve yourself. Always try and improve your house, because it's your major investment and it protects your family. Yeah. And I always tell people, make it strong, then pretty. Okay, so because a lot of these things are just a fraction of a cost. Let's say remodeling your kitchen or remodeling your bathroom.
Right.
Yeah.
So are there other questions from the audience for Dennis? Because, this was really awesome. And, it's great that, he took the time to conduct today's session, about how you can harden your home. I mean, a lot of this is just valuable information, about what you can and should be doing, like Dennis said, yeah, over time in order to protect your house. Anybody?
Yes, Dennis, I agree. This was terrific. But I missed your first slide at what was your complete email address? Not that I would ever use it, but.
Oh, okay, hold on. Hold on. Well, you know what? You could call me at 544-8608. And my email address, I stopped sharing my screen, so I'm trying to put it back up. So, okay, here we go. Hold on. Let me.
And I was also curious that you seem to be such an expert on this field, and I was wondering, what has that got to do with Sea Grant?
Okay, well, Sea Grant is part of NOAA, and of course NOAA is the National Weather Service. And also I noticed that one of my colleagues, Cindy Natman, is on the. So Cindy, you want to mention anything, or Stan, right?
Yeah. Hi, Dennis. You did an awesome job as always. So our connection with the built environment started with our old director, Gordon Graw, and we realized that everything that happens in the ocean and the coastline is impacted by the built environment. And so Dennis was actually one of the first extension agents that really worked closely with the community on how to make improvements to our ecosystem, whether it be the coral reefs that are impacted by the pollution that runs into it from the runoff to, to basically storm hazard preparation and homeowner's handbook. So, and I don't know if he told you, but he actually has worked with our Sea Grant network is 33 programs all around the country, plus Guam, Puerto Rico, and all around the Gulf Coast. And so he's actually worked with 13 other programs to have them develop homeowners handbooks as well, which is a real testament to the importance of this work.
Yeah. And so Stan and anyone else, if you have any questions or want any resources, you could get my contact information here, or you go to the University-wide Sea Grant College Program website. That's where you download the book. You could even contact Cindy. There's a directory for all the staff there. Cindy's name's on there. My name's on there. We're all around, to help you out if you have any questions.
Well, and Dennis, you said because you recorded this session, you will post it, or you'll give me the link of where it's posted so that we can distribute it, because this is excellent information that I think everybody should have access to.
Yes, thanks for mentioning that, because we are recording it right now, and
right.
I'm going to ask Cindy and our other communications colleague Heather to post the recording on our website link for the homeowner's handbook. Yeah.
Perfect.
And
Perfect.
we'll let you know when it's recorded, when it's on. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, hey, Dennis, I want to thank you for the great job that you did, for us, for those that, were able to join. This was an awesome presentation. And I have nothing but thanks, for the fact that you were willing to do this, for our community.